Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. The studio lights were cruel in their familiarity, hot, humming, indifferent. They had lit Mark Consuelos' face for years, during costume fittings, red carpets, the occasional quiet interview when he'd been expected to laugh on cue. Tonight they felt like an interrogation, and the hum of the lights matched the low, restless buzz in the audience. The stage of the morning show was a circus ring and a confessional booth at once. Cameras perched like observant birds, teleprompters glancing sideways with their lines, the band giving the set a loose, anticipatory rhythm. A banner hanging above the stage fluttered with glossy promises. Live, moments that change everything. He had never felt small on that stage. Not with the applause that welcomed him, or with the practiced banter that unfurled like a ribbon at the hands of seasoned hosts. He had been a storm of jokes and stories, a practiced presence in rooms that needed light. But tonight, the script had been ceremoniously ripped up. There would be no jokes, no playful jabs. There would be no teleprompter cues to rescue him. There would be an announcement that belonged only to him. He waited in the wings until the host gave him the cue. When Mark stepped forward, the applause rose like a tide, polite and bright. He offered a smile, the same tilt to his mouth his publicist had taught him to make look casual, and for a second he wondered if his smile had the weight he wanted it to carry. The crowd saw the smile and assumed this was another segment, maybe a surprise performance or a pitch for a charity gala. Nobody looked for confession in a grin. Mark, the host called, warm and practiced. So great to have you. We were just saying. He let the chuckle die in his throat, and the studio quieted with the curiosity of listeners who suspect something important but can't place their finger on the why. The camera moved closer to his eyes, the only honest part of his face. They're often called steadfast, those eyes, steady, Irish blue, like someone who will never blink at a challenge. But tonight, they were paper boats on a trembling ocean. I'm not here to promote anything, he said, and the honesty of that line knocked the banter into silence. He had imagined those words 1,000 ways in the past week, sculpting them in the dark of his kitchen at 2 in the morning, waking his wife for a rehearsal he could not afford to fail. He had imagined every possible reaction. Relief, confusion, applause, a sudden eruption of commercial sponsors worried about ratings. He had not imagined how his voice would sound, small, intimate, a river narrowing to a stream. The host softened, sensing the gravity of the moment. The audience leaned forward with their collective appetite for spectacle, unaware that the spectacle this time was a human hand unclasping from the role they'd all known. Mark, the host said slowly, "You okay?" "You look worried," he finished for them. He smiled without meaning to. "I am. I'm very worried. And excited and scared in ways that don't make sense. But mostly I've been thinking about what's left." There it was, a phrase that would split the day in half for everyone who would later open their devices and see the headline. What's left? He told them a story first, and stories have a way of softening the edges. He told them about the house in the suburbs he grew up in, about the way his father used to whistle when he mowed the lawn. He told them about a wooden desk tucked into a corner of a tiny apartment where a younger version of him had written lines and rehearsed them until his voice was raw. He told them about a woman whose name he said quietly into his lap, and whose laughter filled living rooms and calloused his hands in the best ways. Some of it the audience recognized as the public architecture of a life, a marriage, a kid with quick humor, a career built on doors that opened when he knocked politely. But then he reached into his pocket, unfolded a paper that had been folded and folded until the fibers were soft, and the room felt the way a winter dawn feels when you realize the frost is deeper than you thought. "This is a letter my mother wrote me when I told her I was leaving school for the first job that paid me enough to stop worrying about the next month," he said. He hesitated, eyes skimming the inked lines as if they could hold back time. The audience quieted. In this pause, sound could be a prophecy. She told me, he read, voice a little softer now, that there's a difference between chasing applause and answering the small voice that asks you to be kinder, to be braver in the way you wake up every day. She told me that success is a house you visit if the people inside know how to love. I kept that letter with me so long I thought I was keeping her alive. A ripple of collective recognition passed through the room, those tiny truths that make strangers empathetic. He spoke then of a box in the attic of his childhood home he'd never opened. It had been one of those weekends when the world felt too loud and he craved the hush of paper and dust. He climbed the ladder, found the box wrapped in twine and the exact smell of attic air, and opened it with the reverence of someone decoding a map. Inside were things he had thought lost, ticket stubs from plays he'd watched with trembling wonder, a grocery list his mother had written with an unsteady hand months before she passed, a series of journals in which a young man he did not fully remember had scrawled a single repeated line, "Teach what you love. Teach who needs it." He had laughed at that at first. "Teach who needs it" had seemed like a line written by someone who had read too many inspirational pamphlets. But there was a texture to it, he told the audience, like how a song sounds different when you're older, when you can pick apart the notes and hear the missing ones. He began to read the journals. He read pages of a person who loved the theater, but more than any stage loved the idea of bringing story to those who had never had room to imagine. The idea hooked him like a fish on a line. "And then my daughter wrote me a note," he said, voice small. He spoke of his child's childish handwriting, a note found in a backpack. "Daddy, teacher?" Scribbled as a question, as if it were a possibility the world could supply like milk in a carton. He had kept that too. He kept a lot of things. What he did next was the pivot, the turning point that made the cameras orbit like satellites. He looked at the host, at the producers, at the bank of cameras. He looked at the audience who had come ready for laughter and found themselves on the edge of something else. "I'm stepping away," he said. The words were simple. The sound in the room was not. A collective inhale stretched the air like a single cord held too long. "Not forever," he added quickly, because the language of permanence felt cruel, and he did not want to leave them dangling. "For now. For a while. I'm going to teach. I'm going to start a nonprofit that gets kids into theaters and classrooms and rehearsal rooms who wouldn't otherwise know they could own a line, a story, a stage. I'm going to be with my family in ways I haven't been." The host's eyes widened, then softened into something wholly human. The tapes in the control room whirred. Somewhere, someone hit record on a device that was already recording. Co-hosts exchanged looks, professional masks dissolving into unguarded curiosity. In the front rows, a few people applauded automatically. The applause was small and polite because the announcement asked for more than clapping. It asked for empathy, and empathy is stubbornly quiet. "I know how that must sound," he said, running his hands through his hair. "A nervous tick. It sounds like a retreat. Like I'm giving up. That's not it. I'm choosing differently." He told him about the pilot program he had already begun quietly 3 months earlier. Weekend workshops in a community center that had lost its rent. Classes held in a church basement where fluorescent lights hummed so loud they drowned out soft voices. He told him about the kids who climbed into the chairs and learned to speak a line and found it had wings. He spoke of a teenager who spoke for the first time, about their mother, and did not cry because the room had given them a scaffold to build on. He spoke of a boy who had yelled at a director, not out of disrespect, but because he had ideas and didn't know where else they might belong. "I saw a change happen in those rooms," Mark said. "Not because of me. Because of what happens when you give someone permission to belong." It was a corporate sentence dressed in the garb of a sermon, but sincerity gave it weight. He could have announced a brand or a perfume. He had chosen instead to announce a realignment of priorities. The media world moved fast. When the show went to commercial break, producers whispered and a call tree started to hum. Cameras cut away to a montage of Mark through the years. Handsome, smiling at premieres, his hair with different angles of shine, him with his family walking at an awards after party, him in darker, more serious roles that suggested an actor willing to put aside vanity for craft. During the montage, the band played a softened tune. It felt like a movie montage because television knew how to make endings look beautiful. When the live feed returned, the host asked the question the nation had started typing into its search bars. So what happens next? Mark looked out at the audience, at the people who'd come for surface-level entertainment.